and welcome to another episode of The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am your host, Blaine Bartlett. This planet that we live on, this little blue dot out in space, is kind of a fascinating little mote of dust. And I came across a photograph the other day that was taken by, I believe, Michael Collins. I'm probably misstating the name here, but as an astronaut in one of the Apollo missions, taking a shot of the lunar lander and the Earth in the background. And the caption on the photograph was, Edwin Collins was the guy's name. He said, he is the only person that has ever lived in the entire history of the planet that is not in this photograph. That is not in this photograph. And I mean, I got chills when I saw that. I was kind of like, well, that kind of puts some things into perspective. Everybody that has ever lived lives on this little mote of dust, kind of moving through space here. And what's interesting about that is, and people that listen here have heard me say this a couple of different times, we've got about 7 billion people on this planet. And we all occupy this home turf, so to speak. And there's an assumption embedded in that sense of we're all in this together, that we all should be kind of alike. But what's really true is we grow up in completely different worlds. Your world, my sister's world, my brother's world, they were all different in some way. So what's really true is I'm continuously interacting with aliens. I mean, that's essentially what's going on in the world here. We're all, interacting with aliens. And it's not surprising that we end up stepping on toes all of the time because we don't speak each other's language. We don't have a sense of the worldview of the people with whom we're interacting. My guest today, Dr. Pauline Crawford, has now, I don't know that she's explored it from the way that I've just described it, but she has done some fascinating, groundbreaking work on creating authentic harmony cultures. And we had a pre-interview conversation prior to going live here. And I was just fascinated by some of the things that she's up to here. And I'm going to just read something here that she sent me. One of the things that she's working with here is through the profound understanding of women and men. We are different from a gender perspective, and our brains are wired differently. So there's an emerging leaders who can integrate the concept, and here I'm reading, integrate the concept of a joint custody world into their strategic growth enterprises, will find ways to succeed in ways that others don't. And that notion of joint custody world, okay, I'm living with aliens. So joint custody. Pauline, welcome to the show. I am so looking forward to this conversation because, it's juicy. You've got some very interesting ways of looking at things here, and not only just interesting ways of looking, but some interesting ways of addressing these differences. So with that kind of an introduction, why don't we just jump in? Yeah, joint custody world. I'm just going to take the big one right now, and we can start just chewing on it for a little bit. What do you mean by a joint custody world?
Oh, well, I will tell you, Blaine, and I am so excited to be here. That introduction was absolutely perfect for what we're going to share. Because recently, and only recently, and I think it was maybe you who told me, but half the world is under 30. Yep. So if you talk about joint something and something is half of something, then the joint, I'm a mathematician, so, joint custody of this world. If we're half under 30 and we're half over 30, and also we're half male and half female, more or less by a few percent. But within that half the world that's under 30, there are half are women and half are men. And so the women and men over 30 are also that balance. So why the hell are we not having a joint custody world? So if we look at the word custodian, as a custodian, we're being given this planet. So your explanation of the planet was perfect. We have been given this planet. We are, whatever it is, 7, 8 billion. We are uniquely different. We all have a different fingerprint. And yet there's lots of similarities when you start drilling down. But the numbers really, really really astound me because, when if we want to create a baby, there is one way of making a baby. I know that you can have artificial insemination, etc., but generally it's an egg and a womb and a semen. So it's a joint custody to create these 7, 8 billion people in the world who seem to be fighting more than loving. And you start asking the question, why do we have to fight for joint custody? So when I first started talking to people about joint custody world, those people who had a bad divorce took it in the wrong way. But I said, no, it's about being in joint responsibility for this planet. And that means all the way down the line. So not just having children and families, but businesses, societies, governments, nations. We know, for instance, there's climate change and there's planetary movement at the moment where we're going to have big earthquakes and all sorts of things changing. Surely we need to be enjoying custody of that. And if that, to start with, is men and women, it could be under 30s and over 30s, but I look at men and women because we are the fundamental yin yang. We are the combination that has created this world. And if we look at nature, we find nature has got a very good hold on this.
Yes, absolutely.
And, yeah, some nature fights with each other. Some animals kill other animals, but generally nature has a very good ecosystem that works situationally for whatever is needed to grow plants or have animals live. And we don't seem to take the lessons from that. I don't really understand that. And so I think we become too intelligent for our own good. What do you think?
I well, I think that you're onto something with that. For me, I grew up on a farm, and nature has always been, I think, my if there's a mentor teacher in my life that I keep defaulting back to, it is nature. Um, yeah, in the business world, there's always conversation about free market economies and all of that kind of stuff. The only truly free market economy I have ever found is nature.
Yes,
Yeah, there are no artificial impediments. I mean, where there are no artificial impediments, dams and whatnot, nature works so that it achieves a symbiotic balance. So that
yes,
to the point of joint custody or custodial experiences, every part of nature serves in a custodial role in some way, shape, or form. And I like the way that you equated custodial with joint responsibility.
yes,
uh, you know, able to respond, response able. And it eliminates blame from the conversation when I'm actually working from that perspective. It's not you did it to me, or they were the bad person, or they were the bad entity. It's no, we have joint custody here.
yes.
Where did this go off the rails, and what's my role in that? Because there's always my role in it in some place.
Well, absolutely. And I want to pick up on that because the role of men and women over the last at least 2 centuries, we could probably go back further, but even the last 200 years, we know that various aspects of our life have been designed by men with no deference to yourself. But, and I don't mind that in the past because that's what men had to do. At the time, it was efficient. Even if you go back to 1900, women didn't have the vote, all the things we know. But it was an efficient system, but it just didn't suit one half of the world.
you
So
know,
both parts needed to learn the rules of the new jungle, and we've got even more new rules now because we're past COVID. We're into AI. We're into drones, and God knows what coming next. And also, women have changed their roles over the last 100 years. We have fought for all the things we wanted to fight for. So I came up with this idea of saying, let's say goodbye to equality and hello to harmony. Because if you're going to have joint custody and it's going to be a mutual responsibility to make the world the best it can possibly be, then harmony struck me as the better way of doing that than fighting for equality. So I feel that we've passed the equality marches and the equality needs, and we have to question why we haven't achieved it. We haven't. I mean, that's
no,
full
we
stop.
haven't.
Even the UN, when the UN says, it'll take 300 years for pay parity, and I'm thinking, but none of you will be here then. why would you even say that? So I think I understand why we've got to where we are. And what I see is happening, because you've always got these, what do you call it, pendulum swings, is that women have almost got, some women have got to an aggressive place of, well, we could run it better. I don't know that it is running it better, it's running it differently. So it's that whole thing of, are we just trying to get things right, or are we trying to do the right things? And I understand why men might be fearful of changing the rule, because that's how it was made. It's like you make something and then somebody else comes in and says, no, I'm going to change it all. That's not really joint custody. So I do see the issue is that we really need to set out again. People say, well, you can't forget the past. I think I'm not forgetting the past. I'm utilizing it, but actually really literally put a new tablecloth on the table and invite people to that table and say, there's nothing on here. You bring with you your experiences, but now we have to understand, if we're joint custodians, what does that mean to you? And then the tricky bit is listening. And and then you come to an issue, because women and men listen differently.
Yes, they do. They do listen differently. I mean, speaking of personal experience here, I'm married. Uh,
But you see, that you see again, if we have the proposition that this is good, because I get to find a lot of people when I talk about the value of differences, they said, "Oh, you shouldn't focus on differences because that means you're putting people in boxes." I said, "No, I'm actually not. I'm saying, you look at the flowers, again,
mhm,
nature, the trees. I know that's an oak tree and that's a willow tree and that's something else tree, but I don't call them all the same tree, because
exactly.
they function different. A palm tree. So why do we have to be annoyed about difference? We've created a label which says differences are a problem. No, they're not. Actually, women and men are made to be together, yin and yang. And even
Hmm.
within the male cohort, there's masculine and feminine energy. And within the women, there's masculine and feminine energy. So
Yeah.
people misunderstand what masculine and feminine energy is with regards to male and female biology. So
Hmm.
there's a very interesting conversation that people need to have, which I sense the resistance comes from both sides.
Yeah. I used to do something in some of the training programs that I would facilitate. I'd bring two people up to the front of the room and just have them sit in front of the room. I mean, it's all right. You just sit and face each other, kind of dyadic. They're just kind of sitting facing. And then to the audience, I would say, "Tell me what you notice about these two people." And that was the only instruction. Tell me what you notice. Invariably, the conversation would go to how they are different,
Yes.
not how they are similar.
Yeah.
And the default for the human being or the human experience seems to be to sort for differences rather than similarities. And it's in that sorting default that there's all kinds of mischief that gets made. Because if you're not like me, then you're the other. So there's a lot of othering that comes into play with that. So part of my question here is, if we're looking at authentic harmony cultures, and I love the way that you're marking this out, saying goodbye to equality and hello to harmony.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about this notion of authentic harmony cultures? Hi, I'd like to ask you to do something for me if you wouldn't mind. If you like this episode, I'd like you to not only subscribe on your favorite site, but I'd also like you to give a rating. Ideally, a five-star rating would be greatly appreciated. But I think more importantly also would be just some comments. That helps with the algorithm and it helps build the audience with this. And more than anything else, if you could invite somebody else to listen, just share this episode with a friend, with a colleague. And I'd like to see how we can grow the soul of business. I think it makes a difference. Thanks.
But in authentic harmony cultures, for me, that one of the baselines is that you accept that you really do want lots of differences. You try running an orchestra with all the same instruments.
Exactly.
So I mean, I know if you go to a violin concerto, it's all violins. Now that's wonders, and it's relevant that we can have all women businesses or all women communities or all men. that's okay. But the full orchestra is a mixture. It's a mixture of not just sound, but energies. You know, the violins are very different to the drums, to the percussion and the brass section. It's absolutely, and then of course you've got the music. You know, what do we actually? What is the story of the music, let alone the players, and who's conducting? And I think that's for me an authentic harmony culture is it is about the inspiration from the top or the middle or whatever, but it's a way of understanding what is the mixture that we want to have in the room. As soon as you start doing that, my husband's a musician, so I know that, you know, he says harmony has to be two voices at least.
At
You know,
least.
otherwise it's one voice. So how can we get several voices coming together? Uh, and I had an extraordinary experience. I went to Kenya one time. I was walking up Mount Kenya, which was tough in itself, with a very disparate group. That's a long story. But when we came to base camp on the last night, we asked the Kenyan guides to sing. And this group of 50 men sang in the most amazing harmony, just like that. No instruments, nothing. And the harmonies were amazing. And then you'd hear top voice and then down, but it was the energy of that sound was amazing. Now, if you look at the world and you see men and women arguing, or women arguing with each other, or men arguing with others, it's a very different sound. It's a very different energy.
Hmm.
I want this. Why haven't I got that? Why am I not in the boardroom? Why are you in the boardroom? You know, I mean,
Yeah.
we are talking about people and people not understanding. We've been so long in one tradition of what it is. You know, when men created business, women were at home having babies, we haven't really understood what the magic is of coming together. And in my book, I write an epilogue about the bears and the birds. You
Yes.
can guess who the bears are and who the birds are. But we designed the world for the bears, and then the birds came along. But we never had the conversation about how can we blend this? How can we integrate it? So if you ask people what harmony means to you, you'll still have different words coming in, but it's a gathering of voices, of sounds, of people, and therefore having difference is magical,
Hmm.
but means you have to understand the differences.
And appreciate the differences. So,
Appreciate the
which brings me to a question here about the nature of being right. Um, the idea, I mean, another thing that I used to do, and again, I did some silly things when I was facilitating groups. Music was part of it. I would bring a very common song into the classroom, and I knew enough about music to be dangerous, but I would have people either singing it or playing instruments in 3, 4 time, five, 5, 6 times, just different metrics, or what's the word I'm looking for here? Um, the phrasing was different, but it was the same music, but it was so discordant because everybody was playing to their own beat, and I mean,
yeah,
and it was like fingernails on a chalkboard. If, I'm going to date myself with that metaphor, but but it was that screeching that was just unnerving. And it
yeah,
was meant to duplicate the conversations that were going on in the organization. They thought they were all playing the same music, and in many cases, they were playing the same notes. They were saying the same things, but the melodic infrastructure undercurrent was not coming
no,
together. There was not a common ground for them, which is where harmony. Again, kind of coming back to that culture of harmony.
absolutely. And this idea of common ground. So not, and I think the other thing is that there are some people who are tone deaf. So I mean, in terms of
Yeah, I raised my
and
hand.
people who may have learned the violin for 100 years, but they still can't play. And that's not being dictatorial, but you know, you want to put the right people together. And I believe also there's a right place for everybody. So,
Hmm.
like when you look across industry sectors, not everybody is suited to everything. And you sometimes find um, women who want to be lumberjacks and airline pilots, but that's unusual, you know. And you find men who want to be nurses, you know, but we have as well as stereotypes about types of people, we haven't. allowed it to be more free flow. And your question about, the I'm right, you're wrong, which is where harmony breaks down. I studied these ways of being for different archetypes. So generally, men are very linear, task focused. Generally, even though there are some men who are more, I call ruler. They're very, I want it and I want it now, and I don't care what you know. Whereas there are other men like yourself, I believe, who say, "Well, why is that? And can we actually put some sensitivity in?" It's still about getting it done on this straight line road. Now, women are more complex and women go round. So even when we do a task, we do it in this round motion and we go, well, and. And men generally look at women when they're doing that, go, ooh, I don't understand that. So let's leave them over there. So conversations with women are different when they're on their own and with men when they're on their own. But when they come together, you get this wonderful blend, if you like, of the violins and the brass. You know, it's and you get women who play brass and men who play violins, but it's the sound that's different. And I think if we could listen to the sound of conversations, that would be really helpful. So when we come to, well, I'm right, in a way, everybody's right.
Yeah,
and,
that's
and
it.
because everybody has a perspective. So I ask in my book, I talk about magical conversations. It's asking people to share their experience without judgment. So
Hmm.
it's instead of saying, well, I think this, it's saying, well, in my experience of leadership or in my experience of conflict or in my experience, this is how I see it. So you're owning your words into the space. And everybody in the space is allowed to accept or reject. But if they reject it, they're not allowed to fight it. They just go, okay, that's not my perspective, but I hear it. So I think if we could start hearing each other, knowing
Hmm.
that we're different, and also when we don't understand something, to say, didn't quite get that word, or I see that word differently. Or also proactively saying, I would love to know everybody's view of this word. Take a word like harmony, but even something like collaboration.
Good one.
Women will see that in a circle, whereas men will see, well, it's people doing things for me, or I'm doing something for them. It's more transactional, and maybe um, we need a mixture of the two, because the danger with always talking is things don't get done, and that's a danger sometimes with women, that we are going round in too many circles, and we need that influence. I call it the circle and the straight line. Everything is a straight line or a curve or a circle or a box, and there are certain things that need to be made with circles, like wheels, and things that need to be made with boxes, like buildings. We need foundations that are solid, and we need this circle to take us around places. Now, if women and men could understand that, when we look at the complexity of women, you also find masculine and feminine energy. So my magician, who is the logical woman, she's a woman, she's a nurturer, but she's always in her head going, I got an idea. Can we do this? And the sovereign is a woman who's always building her castle, and she's fantastic at detail, and she really wants to build it. So, like with the men, you've got the ruler, and then this philosopher like you who really observes. Now, we want all the qualities, they're all the pieces of the orchestra. And the challenge we've got, Blaine, is that we've played the piece of music for the last 2,000 years, which has been designed by men.
Hmm.
And I know there's a lot of men who are very wise, like yourself, who really want to make things different. And I don't want them to be different. I don't want women to be different, but I want to have a new blueprint where we say, actually, what I bring to the table is good.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm struck by something that Bucky Fuller said years ago before he died, that in order to change, to really have something new come into play, the old paradigm has to disappear. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. And that's essentially what I'm hearing you speak to. And it's one that I absolutely align myself with. The paradigm of crony capitalism, we'll call it that, crony capitalism, just in the business context, which is a transactional way of working, got us to a certain point, and the price on that has been pretty horrendous. When we just look at the environment and the calamities that we're faced with, and I won't even go down that rabbit hole. But the idea of changing the paradigm into something that I'm calling compassionate capitalism, which is a
Yeah,
recognition and a behavior that is linked to the recognition that everything is connected in some way. And this kind of goes full circle back to the idea of being a custodian and taking joint responsibility for the outcome. Um, when we manufacture something or create something or produce something and sell it to the consumer, what do they do with it when the life cycle is completed? If I'm not considering that on the front end when I'm manufacturing,
yeah.
how do I facilitate an elegant disposal at the end of the life cycle? That's something that is absolutely crucial that I want to be able to do. So, sorry about that. I thought I had my phone off.
Oh, I think this brings up an interesting thing when you talk about the soul of business, and my consultancy is called Corporate Heart. So, what is the heart of business? What is the soul of business? And it's, I think we've been driven by centuries of facts, and you know that's important. Academia is important, skills are important, and now we've got this whole emotional side, which is actually feelings matter and
Yeah,
natural gifts matter. And no, you don't have to go to Harvard to be bright. You can actually learn it in your kitchen. In fact, any mum who's got several children is actually a brilliant manager. I never
absolutely.
realized that.
Yeah,
We need to translate what we need. So I love your idea because I don't want everybody to be managed by other people. And I think the core of what I'm really at the moment is that the core right we have is to think for ourselves. And of course, we have an education system which doesn't run on those lines. So if we're going to actually understand that we can think for ourselves and we can grow our younger generations with that thought. And I had this real aha moment talking about intergenerational wisdom with under 30s, that the over 30s are also intergenerational wisdom.
yeah.
So it's about sharing. And what if we had a 25-year-old entrepreneur partnering with a 55-year-old entrepreneur? You've got multiple value there. And I just think the divide is happening because of old traditional ways. And we
Hmm.
need to break that without damaging everybody on the way. And that's a challenge.
Yeah, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bath, but the bath needs to be changed.
And I think, I know a lot of women who either want to control the world or not change it. And I'm sure there are a lot of men who want to control the world or not change it. And I think we do want to change the world and we want to run it together, which means that we need to have those conversations and that we aren't going to think the same way. We aren't going to say the same words, but we might be using the same words. And we know that the English language is one of the most complex languages in the world. So I can say one word and everybody around the table will actually hear it differently.
Oh, guaranteed. I've got stories about that as well.
But there's an interesting aspect of fact and fiction, and I'm sure you've come across this in your life, but so many people live in the fiction of what they believe is facts. And
Yes.
it's not, it's the story that we tell ourselves. And I love the idea of sharing authentic stories without questioning. So just
Mhm.
coming full circle around to the person who says, "But I'm right," and then we get the dictator, narcissist, etc. Maybe they're fearful. They're fearful of being in that open space that says, "Oh my God, I can be not right. I can be different, and I can actually say, gosh, I don't know that at all."
Well, there's an interesting. I had a mentor years ago, a fellow by the name of Wilschutz, Dr. Wilschutz, um, said to me that people connect through vulnerability. And then I amended that and I said, and they disconnect through certainty. And so what you're speaking about here in terms of authentic harmony cultures and in conversations has to do with being willing to be vulnerable, because at that point in time there's an opening. There's a place for people to connect with me. That is outside of my story.
Absolutely, and it's okay to be not in agreement. But for
Yes.
me, it's not right to be killing that person because they're not in agreement. You know, and I mean that not literally, or obviously not literally, but you know, with words that are harsh and hateful. And you know, we've now got this idea that we have hate speech and everything, but then nobody knows what it actually is. You know, somebody could say something, say, "Oh, that's hate speech," and then somebody says, "No, it's not." And again, it's all about having the conversation and that
Yeah.
aha moment when you realize somebody is not translating the word in the way you want.
Yeah.
And you
The
see,
aliens are speaking.
no, there's a famous recent statement by, oh God, I can't remember her name, actress, but she said, women have spoken men forever, but men haven't spoken women.
That's true.
But
It sounds like something that John Gray would say.
yes, but the thing is, I think we don't need to necessarily learn the other language. We need to understand the interpretation, and that's different. So if
Yeah.
you go back to the energy level, women have a very nurturing energy, and men generally do not use that word. I've done a lot of research on this. It's not a word that men articulate or put in a balance sheet or kind of have, but women do nurture. And it's
Hmm.
not just babies, it's cats, dogs, you know, situations, everything. Whereas men have that direct, straight line, support, protect, drive. And so when some of these energies get mixed together, we just need to have the conversation about what's the best way forward. So the
Hmm.
paradigm of the old world, which was rule, command, money, you know, provide, that's gone. And it's now a joint custody where we can actually do this together.
We can.
And actually our children are going to really benefit.
On that note, I'm going to have to bring us to a close because that is ultimately the end game, I think. The children. Okay. Yeah, you
Absolutely.
and I mean, again, I kind of go back to Michael Collins taking that photograph of the lunar lander, and everybody that's ever existed is in that picture except for him. We're all going to die within 100 years. Everybody that I know is gone. Everybody that I know is gone. And well, the only ones left behind are my kids and my grandkids. And what have I left them? Yeah, that's worth considering. That really is. Pauline, where can people find out more about what you're up to, and how can they
Well,
get in touch with you?
I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook. Pauline Crawford, you'll find me. Um, there's another Pauline Crawford who's an actress and has passed away, I think. So don't choose that one. But you can find me, and also my website is Corporate Heart International. That's sort of really just look for me on LinkedIn. That's the best place to find me. And I love having conversations, as you can tell.
Yes,
So I would love to speak to anybody who is intrigued by the joint custody world. Would like to know more. I would love that.
excellent. Folks, I'll have all of this information in the show notes for sure. Thank you for listening to this episode, Dr. Pauline Crawford. I want to thank you for just being a wonderful guest. It's just a joy to have this conversation. I knew it would be.
Thank you, Blaine. It's been a joint custody conversation.
Yes, it has. It has. We created something beautiful here, I think.
Absolutely.
So, folks, tune in into the next episode. And if you like this episode, shameless plug here, feel free to uh, like it, on whatever your favorite podcast platform is. Do click like, leave a comment. The comments are useful. They help spread the message. And as always, my admonition here, as I sign off, is find a way in your life to be a center of distribution, not a center of accumulation. Nature works through distribution. Life works through distribution. That's where joy exists, is when you're giving things away. Don't worry about accumulating. There's plenty to go around. It's an abundant universe. It's an abundant universe. And until next time, thank you for listening.